climate change, geopolitical turmoil, natural disasters, the dreaded Rona, inflation, teacher shortages. There's a lot happening for us at the moment. And if we think about when we add on top of that, we've got our own individual personal challenges that just make things so much more difficult. Our baseline stress levels as a society are substantially higher than what we're used to. Now, we've been resilient as a society recently. If anything, it's the defining, I guess, mood of our time. But in order for us to be able to move forward into the next chapter, we're going to need to do more. Now, before I move on to that, I just want to show you some young people on the screen in a moment. And I want you to think carefully about how you perceive these young people. Now, just before I do that, I just want to talk about our definition of resilience at the moment. Now, have you heard the term bouncing back? Yeah? Raise your hand if that's the definition that you've been taught at school or about, or yeah, you've heard of that. Great, fantastic. So bouncing back, I really hate that definition. I really don't think that it defines anything about what resilience actually is. So I guess today I'm going to be challenging that. So in some circumstances that does make sense. If we fall over, then yeah, we stand back up. That's fantastic. But that's not always what resilience is about, and it's not as simple as that. So if we're going to be able to move forward as a society, we're going to need to know why we need resilience. We need a better understanding of why we need it. We need a better understanding of how to actually build resilience, how to apply it, and we really need a better understanding of what resilience looks like. So, as I said before, here's our two young people. I'm really a great drawer, as you can see. Now, person one has been through the absolute mill. They've really struggled. They've struggled with instability, abuse, mental illness, and an array of whole other challenges that they've had to face alone without family and professional support. Now, person two, they have had a pretty cool life. They're pretty breezy. They've got plenty of support, great career, fantastic grades in school and uni, and life's really going well for them. Now, when you think about your perceptions of those people, what do you think? What are the outcomes of their life going to look like? What will they achieve? And yeah, how much of that is determined from what they have been through so far? Now, the interesting thing is that in this situation, both person one and person two aren't different people. In fact, they're the same person, and that person is me. Now, when I was growing up, here's a little evolution of little Darian. There's school photos of me, and as you can see, I'm in a different school uniform every year. I'm in a different place. And that's because when I was in year one, I went to school without lunch, and this happened regularly, by the way. And my teachers would help me as much as they could. They'd help where they could, which I was very lucky to have that. But some days I didn't have that support, and so I would pick food off the floor and eat it, or I'd pick food out of the bin and eat it. And kids are cruel. I'd get bullied for that, and then I'd cry, and then I'd get bullied some more for crying. And it was a pretty challenging time for me getting through school. Now, my first sort of piece of evidence that I have for when I exercise resilience is in my kindergarten school photo. Now, my mum dressed me in a skivvy, which I hated. I wanted to look like all the other little girls in the little school dress. And mum cut my own hair because she couldn't afford to get a haircut for me. And I hated it. So I tried to fix it, and I cut my fringe on an angle. Now, I think a lot of young people will do that at some point in their lives, and they'll, cut their hair, or they'll try to take control of the situation. And that's the first piece of evidence that you have been resilient in some way, where you have tried to do something for yourself, even if it's something as simple as this. Now, quick guess, how many schools do you think I went to? Do you think maybe 2, 14, 16, 26, 100, something else? Yell it out. A, B, or C? C, A, C? It's C. I went to 26 different schools. And yeah, that explains uniforms. Anyone who said 2 didn't count how many different uniforms I had. But yeah, and believe it or not, I actually went to even more different homes than that because I grew up in foster care. Now, when I was going through all that, trauma, I guess, with the whole lunch situation, there was a lot of reason behind that. And so that neglect and an array of other abuse continued until I was in year 3. And one day I was playing inside at home and my door had a knock. So I went and answered it. It was typically my friends from across the street or something, so I answered it as normal. And it was a lady I didn't recognise, and she grabbed me by the arm, threw me over her shoulder, and carried me to her car. And I was screaming and I was crying out for help, and I thought I was being kidnapped. And then I looked back over my shoulder, and my mum is being restrained on the ground by some police officers. Excuse me. Yeah, so she's on the ground being restrained by police officers, and then I realised, well, actually I never realised until I was older, but what was actually happening was I was not being kidnapped, I was being placed into foster care. So, yeah. Now, lots of great things have happened since then, luckily. So I went to uni, I've met some amazing friends. I volunteered internationally and worked in orangutan conservation, which is the second photo there. I founded my own company, We Future Leaders, and we work with young people of various ages and help them to improve their lives. I've gotten married, my gorgeous husband in the audience is there. Oh, thank you. And yeah, I've pretty recently been recognised for some pretty cool awards. So I like to change my hair a lot, as you can see. So yeah, things have turned around, absolutely, that's great. But yeah, what I'm trying to say is that I know a lot about resilience, as you can probably tell. And in addition to what I've experienced, I've worked with thousands of young people from low socioeconomic areas to higher socioeconomic areas, kids with learning disabilities or kids who have everything. Kids in rural areas to city areas, from public, private, Catholic, independent, homeschooled, and everything in between. And even though some kids are really struggling academically and some are thriving academically, something that I've noticed, not just in my own life, but with the kids that I work with, is that everyone struggles with change. Now, with our resilience topic, we really need to think about how we're going to cope with change. So what's really important to know is that change is inevitable. We can't predict when change is going to happen, and it's ignorant to think that change won't. So what we need to do is prepare for that in some way. And this is where resilience is for everyone. It's not just reserved for the people who have gone through trauma and adversity. Everyone will need resilience at some point in their life. And especially if we're going to be resilient as a nation, we absolutely need resilient everyday people, leaders, and yeah, everybody. So just because you haven't had the chance to exercise it yet, that doesn't mean you don't need it. Now, how do we go about doing those sorts of things when we haven't exercised it before? Well, I guess part of that comes down to recognising that, yes, we know that change is inevitable now, but what we don't expect is that sometimes it's positive change, sometimes it's negative change, sometimes that change is expected or unexpected. And all 4 of those can come with an array of challenges. It's not just the negative experiences that are challenging. Positive changes are challenging too. And so if we don't know how to cope with any of those situations, then we can't be resilient. It's like if someone was to win the lotto and then blow it all. We'd say that that's a positive change. They've won the lotto, good for them. But if they don't know how to actually use that and carry that into the next stage of their lives, then they're not going to be resilient. So this brings to my next point. Resilience is resourcefulness. And I think this is the key thing that underpins what resourcefulness brings to resilience. If you think about, if you've ever played a role-playing game or an RPG, you might collect some loot, right? You know, you never know when you're going to need the health pack for, but you still collect it anyway, right? Because you know at some point it's going to come in handy. Now, in life, that still applies. In life, we don't know what tools we're going to need, but we just collect what we can. And all of us are going to be able to collect different resources at different times. And those resources can be internal or external. So we're going to cover some of those today. But before I get into that, here's an example of my best friend, Georgia. So she recently just went to Antarctica, so cool, to do some Antarctic research. And when she was a young person, she did gymnastics. And something she had no idea about, didn't expect, was that her gymnastic skills actually helped her with her research, because she was collecting some moss samples and she had to stand awkwardly across 2 rocks. And if she wasn't able to be mobile and flexible and she had to do the splits to stand on these rocks, she wouldn't have been able to collect the samples and wouldn't have been able to do so without damaging the moss, which she wasn't able to do. So yeah, you never know when a skill is going to come in handy. So never, ever, ever miss the opportunity to build a new skill or to collect something else for your toolkit. So let's have a look at your toolkit. Back to my awesome drawings again. Now we're going to do just a quick little evaluation of where we're at, and think about the internal skills and tools that you have, and that can come from your experiences or things that you've acquired in any matter. So here's your open toolkit. What's inside it at the moment? If you think there's nothing, that's absolutely not true. Think about if you have, let's say, siblings. What skills have you acquired from that? Maybe some conflict resolution? That skill is absolutely going to be relevant in any form of your life. What about at school? You might have been able to learn how to problem solve or organize yourself, or maybe you're still figuring that out, that's fine. But even just the matter of being able to do something that you don't want to do, that's definitely part of something that can be in your toolkit. Now, those are more internal tools. Think about your external tools as well. So what friends or family or external support can you reach? Do you have a laptop, a pen, notepad? Do you have anything at home or that you can easily access that you could use if you need it? Just take a moment to think about what tools you have, internally and externally. Now, which tool do we use? Now that we know that we've got some tools, that's great, but that's only useful if you know which tools to use in which situation. So the way that we figure this out, I'm not sure what's happened to my slide, but that's all right. Which one puts me in a better situation right now? So if we pick the ones that put me in a better situation right now, that's not always going to put us in a better position tomorrow. So the resources that you need to pick are the ones that are going to help you tomorrow, not necessarily right now. So throw out the instant gratification of wanting to look at your phone, basically. Now, if we think about an example of that, when I was 10 years old, I was very briefly given back to my mum. And we were both traumatised by everything that had happened, obviously. And we both used our resources to be able to get through that. Now, the resources that I used was I threw myself into school. I tried everything that I possibly could to get good grades, not because I necessarily cared about getting good grades, but because it was a tool that I could use to focus on, that I could see the rewards for, and that I knew was going to benefit me in some way, even if I didn't know how. My mum, on the other hand, she also used resources, but the resources that she used weren't helpful to her or anyone. Her resources were alcohol and aggression. And I believe that that was the resource that she thought was best for her at the time. It made her feel better in the moment, but there's no way that it could have helped her in the end. And very recently, actually, about a month ago, I had only just gotten back in contact with my mum after all of those years. And it was unfortunately because she was diagnosed with liver cancer and she's just passed away. So her drinking alcohol not only didn't help in the moment, but it definitely didn't help her long-term tomorrow. So think very carefully about the resources that you use. Are they helping you or are they not helping you? So this is where I think we need to change our understanding of resilience. It's not bouncing back. Resilience is the result of accessing the right internal and external resources that we've spent our whole lives building and curating to help us and others through times of change. So if we're to do that, then we will be more resilient as a nation. Now, if we've got the tools, that's great, and we know what we've got, that's great, but do we just wait until disaster strikes or the challenge we're facing occurs in order for us to use them? No. If you're a paramedic, you're not going to wait until someone's dying to try CPR for the first time. You're going to practice it, right? So resilience is proactivity. Anticipate the resources you're going to need, build them, and practice. So let's just take a moment together. One that's often, not thought about is the need to rest and recharge. And when we're anxious, some common advice is that, just take some deep breaths and count and you'll be right. But who remembers to do that when they're feeling anxious? No one. Probably because it's not at the top of our toolkit. No one's going to remember to use it if it's not there. So let's take a moment now, practice it. Let's be real, you're not going to go practice it when you're at home. So take a moment now, participate with me. Take a deep breath in. 3, 2, 1. Hold and out. 1, 2, 3. Great. Extra tool in your tool belt. Now, resilience is also mapping, okay? Because if we know where we are and if we know where we're going, then we've got a much better idea of what resources we're going to need and which ones we need to build in our kit, if that makes sense. So a lot of people struggle to set goals, and that's fine, but something that you can do right now is evaluate where you are. What tools do you have internally and externally? What skills are you missing? How am I feeling about my future? What are my views on the world and others, and how would I rate my health, happiness, career, and just life in general? When you know where you are, then you know at least where to take the next step forward. So if you do that, you'll be more resilient. Now, with that evaluation of where you are, a lot of the time you don't need to know exactly where you're going. You just need to make the choice of whether or not you're going to go in a positive direction or a negative direction. Because at least if you take a lot of little micro steps forward like I did as a child, I didn't know where I was going to end up, but I knew that if I took control with every little resource that I had and I just took one step at a time, at least I knew that I was going to end up in some sort of a positive direction, or at least I had a fighting chance to. Now, you don't know necessarily where you're going, but you know where you are, and you don't necessarily know what your future is going to look like in any sense of the matter. But you can always build resilience. You don't have to wait for challenges to come your way. Start building your resilience now. And if you're a leader of any sense of the matter, don't just tell people to bounce back. Don't just tell people to be resilient. Explain why they need resilience, show how to do it, and model what the outcome looks like. Thank you.